Hello, everyone. Welcome to the other half, where we talk about the other half, that's us women, as they approach the start of the back half of their career. My name is Wendy Parrish, and I'll be catching up with some of the fabulous women that I've crossed paths with in my life and to get advice and perspective from them on how they're planning for their second half of their career. A few things before we get started. We are live, so bear with us if there's any technical difficulties. This is real time, but feel free to ask any questions in the comments, and we'll try to get to those as we go. And if you want to make sure not to miss an episode of the other half, reach out to connect with me on LinkedIn. Today's guest is my Wharton classmate, Jean Park. I was so lucky to go to business school with Jean, and I'm really excited to have her here today. She's like Jennifer Aniston was to Ellen DeGeneres, my first guest. So welcome, Jean. How are
Hey,
you?
Wendy. I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being on the other half.
Oh
I
my
know we
gosh.
haven't talked in a long time. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what
Yeah.
you've sort of been doing professionally?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll say thank you for inviting me to be on your series. And thank you for letting me be your first guest and guinea pig. I'm super excited. When you had reached out and told me a little bit about why you wanted to start this, it really resonated with me because I am like really in the heart of like thinking about what I want to do with the next stage of my life and my career and and I've had the good fortune of being able to take a little bit of a pause to really ponder that. So I'm super excited to be here and share my story and chat with you about this topic that is just really meaningful to me. Why don't I start with just a little bit about myself? Um, I have spent most of my career in the consumer retail space, which really combines two things that I love. One is shopping. I am the ultimate consumer, and while I'm not an athlete, if shopping were a sport, that would be my sport. And I love being in fast changing industries where you really have brand building and consumer at the core. And one of the things I realized about myself is for me to be my best, at my very best, I really do have to work for companies where I emotionally connect with and can relate to the brands and the products and the consumers that they're serving. So I've been super lucky to have been able to work with really amazing brands, big global brands like Levi's to small startups like Julep. And through that whole process, I've seen all sides of retail, wholesale, specialty vertical retail, and e-commerce, and have really been able to be at the intersection of some really exciting transformative times within the retail industry, starting from the rise of mass market retailers like Walmart and Target to the time when specialty vertical retailers like J. Crew and Abercrombie were the darlings of the industry, to now, where it's all about e-commerce and Amazon ruling the world. Um, so it's been a really exciting time to be in retail and build a career in retail. But what I would say is that the path to that point was not super straightforward. So earlier in my career, I started out as an investment banker at JP Morgan following the oil and gas industry. And I think that really is a nod to growing up in Pittsburgh and a nod to my industrial roots. And then I spent some time as a
Hey, Jean,
consultant. Yeah,
because this
I
is
know. I went
live.
blank.
Yeah.
I
I'm
went
sorry
blank.
to interrupt
So
because I want to hear all that you have to say, but I do want to see if we could fix your camera.
I know. I know. I my these are like real inside behind the scenes.
Yeah.
My camera went blank.
That's okay. That's all
So
right.
I don't know how
Okay,
to
you
turn
know
it
what? While
on
you try
now.
to fix your camera, I'm going to do something funny.
Okay.
So, in preparation for this, for having you on the show, I found some old pictures of us.
Oh my goodness.
So
That will
here
be
we are,
hilarious.
and we're right next to each other because Park and Parish from our Wharton directory way back when. And I loved looking at this because it's just funny to think about that time back then. And then Jean and I were lucky not only to be McKinsey interns the same summer, so we got to go to Aspen to this lovely. I don't know if you remember that, Jean, but it
Oh,
was
that was spectacular.
it
That
was
was
lovely and so
the
fun.
boondoggle of boondoggles.
But we also, before we went to do our McKinsey internship, we're lucky enough to go on the Wharton. They have these global immersion programs where usually it's like two or three different options of if you want to do something during the Maymester, you travel to different parts of the world and learn about businesses. And so Jean and I were lucky to go on South America, the South American Global Immersion Program. I'll say this is a much cuter picture of you, Jean, than it is of me. And there you are with your husband, and I think that's Elizabeth and Oliver as well. And we were in Rio. You can kind of see the hill where the Christ statue is. But and then we have another one just out with our friends that I was like, oh, I'm going to surprise Jean with some
Oh my
pictures from the
gosh.
old days. So I
Oh,
see
I
you're back.
love
So
it, Wendy. I am. So I ditched the iPad and went to the iPhone.
hey, you know what? I like that flexibility and
So real-time
resiliency.
problem solving, like forget the damn iPad. I'm going back to the iPhone now. So yes, I'm back.
Okay. So sorry.
Um,
I really, I was like, oh, I want to show some old timey things of Gene and I.
oh, that's so
So
great.
anyway, so
That's
you were
so
talking
great.
about your time at JP Morgan, I think, and
McKinsey,
oh
yeah, JP
yeah,
Morgan, and then we spent time at McKinsey and was a consultant. And so one of the things as I think back on my career is that that is not a traditional path to becoming a merchant within a retail organization. So it was a non-traditional path to get to where I was, and as I think about what I've learned from each experience, I would say that my career is a little bit like a Swiss Army knife, where I have a lot of tools in the toolkit, and the ability to really understand strategy, finance, and operations from the ground up has really allowed me to have that broader perspective as I lead organizations. So as I said earlier, I'm at a stage right now where I'm trying to think about what's next and how I want to spend my time, in this next phase of my life and my career. So I was so excited to be able to join you on this LinkedIn series.
well, I really appreciate you joining me. And so I had a few questions that I was hoping to talk to you about. Obviously, you've accomplished quite a bit, and I've always really admired everything you get done. What do you attribute your professional success to?
I would say it's three things come to mind that it really centers on, who I am fundamentally as a person, as well as how I approach my work. So first and foremost, so much of what shaped who I am is the fact that I'm a Korean American immigrant, first generation Korean American immigrant. And, my parents came to this country as graduate students with $100 and a suitcase and a dream. And they built their life for my brother and I. And it was, we had the good fortune to be able to travel to Korea last summer,
Oh,
pre-pandemic,
wow.
with my kids to introduce them to the Korean side of their heritage. And we were there with my kids and my parents, so they were with their grandparents. And we were standing at the DMZ, hearing about my father's story of escaping North Korea when he was
Oh,
6 years old.
oh,
And then
wow.
he lived through a war after that. And, and then, came to America and built a life here. And it was really a life-changing moment of just being able to connect that experience with my kids. And one of the things I realize is I will never do anything as hard as what my parents
Yeah,
accomplished and
that's,
achieved in their lifetime. But what they've really taught me is a really strong work ethic.
yeah.
That it's, you have to work and earn everything you get. It's about the hustle. It's about being scrappy, persistent, resilient. And a lot of those characteristics really just, again, are rooted from that sort of immigrant background.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's one thing. And then secondly, as I think about how I approach my work, there's two things that I think really have that rise to the top in terms of importance. One is building relationships. It doesn't matter what business you're in or what field. At the end of the day, it's all about the people.
Yeah.
And everything really is a people business, so it's understanding early on like how important it is to build those relationships, not only with your boss but with your peers, with your team, with investors, with consumers, all key stakeholders, and really trying to understand what interests uh, and motivations each stakeholder has, so that you can effectively build strong relationships, because you can't get stuff done without the
Right.
people.
Right.
So that's been really important. And then I'd say lastly, it's really about connecting the dots. There's so much of organizations these days that are very siloed.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ability to really think about what your task, your job, your role has within the broader organization,
Mm-hmm.
how decisions are being made, and how decisions you make can ripple throughout an organization is really important to inform that decision making, so that you can take a broader view of how all the parts fit together.
Yeah.
So
Those
I
are
would say
all
that's
really, really good points, Jean. I can, yeah, that's amazing. And that's amazing about your dad. It's incredible. Very
yeah,
impressive.
yeah.
I read the book, The Girl with Seven Names. I don't know if you've read that book before, about the woman
No.
that escaped from North Korea and she like went through China. It's a great book, but
Yeah, again, it's something that you realize, like, gosh, the struggle,
yeah,
that people really go through to get to a democratic freedom, and that's why it's more important than ever
yeah,
for us to
yeah.
hold on to
It's
those
yeah,
democracies and freedom.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing. So you have kids,
I do.
and I when I had my son, um, do you feel like your work style changed after you had kids, or how did you sort of balance that? I guess motherhood
Oh my
and
gosh, I know. It's I think going through the pandemic right now, you realize that women are experiencing a disproportionate burden when it comes to work and life and work-life balance. But what I would say is, first of all, as you know, your whole world changes when you have kids. what you see as your North Star of how you organize your life changes when you have kids, because now you're really responsible for another human being. It's just an incredible experience. And for type A personalities like us, like it's really hard to give up control,
Yes.
where you can't control everything and you can't, organize a schedule all the time, and it's not always on your timetable. But what I would say is my work style was most impacted. At a macro level, I feel like I just became a better leader. And
Hmm.
what I mean by that is I just have a whole new level of empathy,
Hmm.
and to really listen to my team, to customers, to management. Like it sort of frames it into a different context of empathy, because at the end of the day, we all want to be seen and we all want to be heard.
Hmm.
And that's especially true when you're dealing with babies and kids. They absolutely cut through the BS, and they just demand that you give them authentic attention.
Hmm.
Um, and we live in a world right now where multitasking is rewarded, but it's really when you can singly focus on one thing is when you can build those authentic relationships. And I remember watching this consumer, or sorry, this so uh, like social experiment with
Uh-huh.
screens. And so they had a mother and a maybe a 5-year-old, and she was instructed by the scientist to be in the room with her child, but just be on her phone.
Oh,
So
okay.
she could not pay attention to the child at all. She had to be on her phone. And so she'd do the things that we sometimes do, which is you're on your phone doing a work email and you're like, yeah, 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 I'm listening, but I'm not really listening. And so it was really interesting to see how the child reacts when they were in the room with their mother, and the mother was paying attention but not really paying attention.
Yeah.
And so the child like put down all the toys, sat there and said, um, "Mommy, I want you to listen to me, but I want you to listen to me with your whole face." And I just love that, because it's like you're not just responding to me, but I want you to listen with your whole face. So that's
Yeah.
like what I now try to remind myself, both with my kids and teams, is I want to be able to listen with my whole face. I want to be
Yeah.
able to authentically give full attention to the task at hand and not try to multitask and do all these things. And I just That's like one of my lessons learned as being a parent, and how that helps me be a better leader.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love that. Listen with your whole face. I love that. Especially
Kids
in
know how to
today.
cut through the BS.
Yes, they do. And they have such an interesting, yes, perspective. Um, I also wanted to ask, you've um, been president of the Julep Salon, and so you've hired a lot of people over the years. And I think by hiring people, you see how a lot of different candidates handle interviews, and you see a lot of different
Yeah.
resumes. What do you think is most important when you're considering who to hire and interview candidates?
Well, there's a couple things. One is, obviously, you have to believe that they can bring some expertise in whatever field or function that they're interviewing for. So that's sort of like a baseline, is that they have a level of expertise that you need. But as I think about building teams, it's really important to think about a diversity of thought and
Mm-hmm.
perspective. And I know it's something that we've been talking a lot about. I feel like we've been talking about it our whole careers, but now there's more of a spotlight on diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that it's so easy to default to what you're comfortable with,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's people who look like you, who think like you, who have the shared experiences. And it really requires work to go outside that comfort zone to find people who really have diversity of thought and perspective. And it's interesting because throughout most of my career, I've often been the only woman in the room, the only person of color in the room where decisions are being made. And my most recent experience as president of Julep, I had the complete opposite experience where it was an all female executive team. My and it was amazing to have just all these smart, passionate women at the table providing their perspectives, and you realize the quality of the conversation is different when it's all women. But even in that case, it's important to make sure you have diversity of thought
Yeah.
and diversity of perspective. And so I've seen both sides, and it is even more important than ever to make sure that you find ways to um, find that talent, because it's probably not necessarily going to be in your immediate networking pool,
Right.
and
Yeah.
keeping that top of mind. And then the other thing is, in terms of how people show up in an interview, it's really, I value curiosity over being smart.
Mm-hmm.
So, how are you in asking um, really insightful questions and being, willing and love the journey of learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I will take um, someone who's curious over someone who's just book smart, and just like, if they don't know the answer, they'll go figure it out. But
Right.
someone who can think outside the task at hand, and be curious about, the broader organization and how it all fits together.
Yeah. 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 Very, very good points. So part of hiring and unfortunately, I feel like there's quite a few people looking for jobs this year after what's
Yeah.
happened. Um, do you have any advice when it comes to negotiating salary, particularly in this type of now what sort of seemed to make a drastic shift from an employee's market to an employer's market?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I would say is most women don't negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem. The reason why it's important that you should always negotiate every offer you get is that, especially as a woman, it sets you on a path of of uh, compensation that can be hard to overcome with merit increases over time. So it sets your baseline.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about ways that we can close the pay equity gap, it has to start from the beginning. You're not always going to have the opportunity to catch up later on in your career. So from the beginning, try to keep it as even of a playing field as possible. And then hopefully through that effort, we can start to close that pay equity gap. So it's really important to negotiate. And the moment you get an offer is when you have all the power. So more, it's the only time really that you do have all the power. They want you. Um, and what I would say is, because it's uncomfortable for a lot of women to negotiate, especially around pay and compensation,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I like to think about it is, imagine that you're negotiating on behalf of a friend, your
Mm-hmm.
best friend, right? And it kind of takes the pressure off, because, um, we're often a lot more aggressive to advocate for our friends than we are for ourselves.
That is so
And
true.
that's, a separate thing that women have to address. But you are going to go to bat for your best girlfriend. So
Right.
imagine you're doing it for your best girlfriend, right? And do it in a way that's really positive and that you're excited, but try to understand, approach it with a company as trying to solve a problem together.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding, uh, with that mindset, understanding all the levers that you have, and what the degrees of freedom are for a company. So it might not just be base salary, but you look at your full compensation package, you look at vacation, you look at merit increases over time, flexibility, relocation. There's a lot of different levers that you can look at when you're negotiating. So, understanding what the levers are and the degrees of freedom you have with the company as you're
Mm-hmm.
having this conversation is really important. And then the other thing, like, I think is really important when you're asking a company about the offer that they're providing you is to ask, you know, if I saw this comp um, uh, where I saw this compensation for everyone at my level,
Mm-hmm.
both men and women, and I saw it on the, printer, you know, uh, in the office, uh, would you feel comfortable with that? Like, are there any areas or places that you think would look weird?
Mm-hmm.
And if so, that gives you an entry point to have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
But, it's like, you just want to make sure that you're being fairly compensated and you can only advocate for yourself.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Great feedback. um, so, if you could go back to your younger self, what advice would you tell yourself professionally or anything really?
I would say that it's so easy in the first part of your career to chase title and
Mm-hmm.
status. And, there's um, a great book that I read recently called The Second Mountain, and it's all about how in the first year, it's by David Brooks,
Okay.
and in the first part of your career, you're always about like chasing the title and the status and all these external validators of success. And so it's really easy to go down that path. But what I found is through my own sort of non traditional career that if you focus more on what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
and what you're learning and what skills you're building, that you come away with a much richer experience that you can draw from
Mm-hmm.
versus just chasing the next promotion, the next title, the next, notch up the ladder.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that it's hard to do, but in hindsight, it's like really, I think, really important in you know, focusing on those things that really help you grow and learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I think that changing your mindset on things that you encounter where I do believe that everyone is on a path, but it's not always easy to find what that path is for you. And sometimes when you face an obstacle, like it's really I had heard this person describing it as like sometimes when you encounter an obstacle, it's just a detour that nudges you in the right direction. And
Yeah.
so I love that thought, which is, take risks. They might not always work out, but they don't work out for a reason, and it's to get you on the right path.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd say it's like I said, easier to say in hindsight than to practice in real life. But
Yeah. No, it's funny because we didn't talk about your answers at all, but one of the things that I always think about is I feel like I started my career in a sprint. Like I just felt like I had to
yeah,
go as fast and as quick and as like get there. And now I realize it's more of a marathon, honestly. And
yeah,
I think a lot of what you're saying is kind of alludes to that a little bit as well. So,
yeah. The journey is long,
yeah.
so a lot of what David Brooks in his book is like. Everyone works so fast and furious to climb that first mountain that when
Yeah.
you get there, you're like, huh, this is it. Is this all that life has to offer? And you realize that, like, it's not really it. Am I, have I achieved the happiness that I really want? Is it true joy?
Yeah.
And that's when people go on their journey for their second mountain.
Yeah. I might have to read that book. That sounds like a great
It's
book.
a good book.
So you hear a lot, in media and things like that about how the different generations work and act and prioritize and things like that. And I think technology sort of plays a little bit into that as well. But what do you feel like younger women have figured out that maybe we didn't know or?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things that I've experienced, working with millennials and Gen Z, emerging Gen Z, is that in the past, people, and I'd say women in general, more specifically, have really tried to focus on like, what is that work-life balance? Like, how do I achieve work-life balance? And, how do I juggle all these things and do that? And what I feel like with the younger generation is it's not about work-life balance, it's just balance.
Mm-hmm.
It's that they approach life as in a more holistic way,
Mm-hmm.
that it's all about bringing your whole self to work, that I find that it's less about compartmentalizing. Here's my work life, here's my social life, here's my, my mom life, my spouse wife. Like, it's not about these compartments, but it's all about who am I as a whole person, and how do I bring that whole self to my working environment. And so I feel like that is the biggest um, difference
Mm-hmm.
in the way that the younger generations are showing up at work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that, the pandemic has also blurred a lot of those lines of like, now it's harder to establish those boundaries between work and life. And so it's forced a lot of people to really rethink how they think about work life,
Yeah.
because it's everyone's at home.
Yeah. Life is happening around their work.
Yes, yeah, in both, it's harder to compartmentalize in both good and bad ways. But I
Yeah.
think the concept of bringing your whole self to work, and like I said, with the pandemic, I think people are more forgiving
Yeah.
of seeing that whole self come to life in a work environment, I think is part of the things that I hope we take forward coming out of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
pandemic.
Yeah. I think that's great. Um, so I was just wondering, do you have a favorite saying or mantra that you like to sort of keep in mind?
Oh my goodness, there's so many, and it, really depends on the moment. I'd say there's two that really come to mind. One is the one by Maya Angelou, where when you know better, you do better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really, it really relies on, positive intent. People aren't intentionally trying to screw you, or they're not trying to, you know, do things in a way, um, but when you know better, you have to believe people will do better. And
Yeah.
that's where it's like, how do you build that awareness? How do you um, learn from all your mistakes? How do you learn from all your experiences to just continue to be a better person? I
Yeah.
think is sort of an underlying uh, quote that really resonates with me throughout life.
Yeah.
I'd say more recently, as I think about kind of this phase of my life, my career, I came across one the other day that was just like really has stuck with me, which is everyone has two lives.
Okay.
And your second life begins when you realize you only have one life.
Oh.
And that just like hits me right now to where I am right now, which is, yeah, we all only have one life. And it is like exciting to be on that second mountain, that second chapter, to say, okay, how do I want to spend my time? What
Yeah.
will bring me true joy? And it's not just about a job. It's not just about uh, making money. It's really about, searching yourself to think about what are those things that, where do you want to have impact,
Right.
and how do you do it in a way that brings you some joy.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are great. I love that. Um, so we've talked a little bit about some of the books you've read and things like that, but this is my last question. We'll see if anybody else has any questions. Do you have like a favorite podcast or blog or book that you feel like you would recommend to others
Oh my
thinking
gosh.
about
Okay.
this? And
So, yeah, so again, like this is the one I've been recommending to everyone, which is so I'm not a religious person, but I do subscribe to the Church of Oprah.
Okay.
And her Oprah's Super Soul Sunday has become my church. And it has been such a spiritual light for me as I think about this next phase of my life and the impact I want to have in the world. And I recommend it to everyone I come across. If you haven't listened to it,
I
Wendy, you have
haven't,
to
so I'm
download it. Oh my gosh. Oprah Super Soul Sunday.
okay.
And then specifically, what I've really enjoyed is her 10-part series with Eckhart Tolle
Okay.
on his book, A New Earth.
Oh, okay.
And again, it's like, I just feel like, again, when you reached out about this topic, this time of our lives, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this for myself. And so I'm so excited, like I said, to be on with you to share. But the 10-part series with Eckhart Tolle on A New Earth really is enlightening as a way to think about, kind of this next stage. So that's like one that I recommend to everyone that I meet. And then just from like a business standpoint, one I really enjoy is another podcast I listen to all the time is Pivot with
Oh,
Kara Swisher and Scott
oh
Galloway,
yeah, yeah.
where they really do a great job of breaking down like tech and business. And so I love their banter and the
Yeah.
way that they deconstruct things. So that's also been something that I have on rotation.
Oh, that's great. Okay, good. Well, you know what? Honestly, we don't have any questions. Rajman and someone I worked with at Diamond Technology said hello, but we don't we don't have any questions. Hi, Raj. It's been a long time.
Hey,
Um,
Raj.
but Jean, are you open to people reaching out to you or connecting with you? Or
Totally, a
okay,
hundred percent. Yes, I'd be totally open to that. So
okay.
I don't know, yeah, what's the
Okay,
best way
great.
to.
Well, I can sort of tag you in the LinkedIn post so people can find you through that if that works.
Yeah, that's
I don't know if
awesome.
you're more of a Twitter person or, whatever. So, well, Gene,
Yeah,
thank you.
LinkedIn is great.
LinkedIn's great. Okay, good. Okay, good. Well, thank you so much. I've learned a lot, and it's been so good to see you. I really
Oh,
appreciate you
so good
coming
to see
on.
you too. I
I
think
know.
this is wonderful, and I'm so excited to see some future guests. So
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you. Thanks. Tell Eric hello too.
I will.
Okay, thank you.